Okay, I think we're good to go. First of all, everyone, I wanted to say thank you for joining. It's Thursday afternoon. I don't know wherever you might be here in Los Angeles. It's a nice sunny day, and we are on a webinar. So I really appreciate y'all joining. I want to say welcome and good afternoon for those of you on the East Coast, and still a good morning for those of you who are on the West Coast. Middle of the country, lunchtime, but I'm glad you're here. And thank you to our speaker, Will Glazier, who's also with me, for joining us today for this very informative discussion. This event is hosted by the Mitigating Unauthorized Scraping Alliance. Also, if you wanted to find the website, antiscrapingalliance.org, also known as MUSA, M-U-S-A. And it's an industry alliance that offers a unified front for protection of and enforcement against data misuse. And the way we're doing it is by collaborating with regulators and industry members to build and share practices for unauthorized scraping prevention, advocating for policies that address unauthorized scraping, and educating the public on the harms of unauthorized scraping. And it's an exciting event for us in particular at MUSA, especially to celebrate and highlight the launch of MUSA's industry practices to mitigate unauthorized data scraping. And these were just published this morning, and you can find them on the website, antiscrapingalliance.org, that were published somewhat, I think, maybe 3 hours ago. The practices were compiled through conversations, and I will say, and I really appreciate the team's effort on this and all the different individuals who participated in it. There was hundreds of hours of conversations and discussions around identifying from industry members and experts and drawing on from some spectacular research that was done by Newton Next in its survey of 1,300 professionals to better understand data extraction and prevention. So let's actually talk about it for a second. And then Will, I know you've been listening to me for the last 2 minutes, but I'm going to come to you very shortly. So one of the things that just in what's in these practices, the practices give individual company practices to protect against unauthorized scraping. And they've evolved significantly over recent years, despite the absence of industry-wide standards, which is a really important point. This is an area that's been evolving not so fast. If you look at the world and the history of the world in the last 10 years is really when it's been starting to evolve and change and get more defined. And this publication is the first step to raise awareness and broaden the adoption of these practices to combat unauthorized data scraping. And so we congratulate all the people who worked on it to get it to where it is today. Now, I will say, as we always say when we release practices or documents or things like that, the publication is not fully comprehensive of every single unauthorized data scraping mitigation practice that companies may take. But it doesn't identify which measures are right for which company or may be appropriate for any given platform. However, it does provide useful guidance for potential detection, mitigation, prevention, enforcement, and all the things that are associated with that. So now let's turn to Will. Joining us now is Will Glazier, the Director of Threat Research at Sequence Security. For those of you who don't know Will, he spent 7 years working on the problem of sophisticated automated abuse and fraud, in particular carried out via APIs. As you can see on the logo behind him, he has APIs very much present there. He currently runs a globally distributed team responsible for threat research and monitoring of the API attack service for large enterprises, including many of the world's largest telecom providers, retailers, and financial institutions. So we're pleased, honored, and thrilled to have Will here. And so, Will, why don't you tell us a little bit about
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, Hemu. I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself, that bio. All of that is true. What my team spends our time on day to day is really, we're a team of researchers and security engineers who are doing R&D to feed the Sequence product to protect APIs from automated abuse, and working a lot with our customers based on the real data, what's really happening in the wild. So what I hope to lend today to the audience is some storytelling from those things that happen in the wild and relate that to these practices. And then you can relate that to the issues you may be experiencing or be trying to protect against at your place. So really just looking forward to, I love the framework that was published. Amos said it was published a few hours ago. I read it for the first time yesterday too, and I loved it. Like really elegant from a whole, like this is not a purely technical problem. So thought that was really soundly addressed.
And actually, well, that's a great point that you said. It's not mere. And first, thank you for the compliments. It goes out to the team that worked on this. It is not a merely technical problem. It's actually a multifaceted problem that involves everything from policy to regulatory to enforcement, mitigation, technology, legal. Even there's all sorts of components that go into it. And any company approaching it has to take a holistic approach to unauthorized scraping, which actually raises the first question, which is what is unauthorized scraping in the first place? And I know I'm not going to throw this at you. It's actually defined in the document. But I will say for the audience, one of the things that we found is that companies define that phrase differently. And it's based on their relationship with their customers, what their business is, what their goals for their business are. But in the end, when there was work being done around this, we actually led to its core definition that we found. And in the practices, we define it unauthorized scraping as, and I'll read it exactly to make sure everybody gets it precisely, as the automated collection of data at scale that violates a platform's terms of service. So in a sense, what we found is that, yeah, there may be many different ways to approach it, many things to tackle, many different business interests or requirements of a company, customer requirements. But in the end, if we can narrow down to some kind of workable definition that allows us to have a more deeper and broader conversation around the different practices that people engage in the company side. And so, Will, first question for you is how, and since you've been doing research on this, how has the unauthorized scraping problem grown just even in the last few years?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's grown writ large because the incentives are going up, right? Data is currency, and the barriers to entry are going down. When we look at the types of tools, like how do threat actors do this, right? How are they executing these scraping campaigns? The bots that they are using to execute these attacks, right? There's a whole cottage industry of where you can rent access to a bot that someone else has developed to execute things for you, right? There's ultimately bots need to be able to proxy their traffic through many IP addresses, right? Basic mitigations will allow you to limit an actor if they're coming from one place. But there's a cottage industry of things called residential proxy networks, which allow attackers to distribute their requests through millions and millions of IP addresses, the same kinds of IP addresses that you and I would be using to access the internet from Comcast, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, right? Here in the US, that is. And so that's really just like the gasoline that's, powering this engine. And the costs of those just continue to go down. So that explains a lot of the rise and the growth from a attacker perspective. From a attack surface perspective, APIs are becoming the engine that powers like the digital economy. And so as more and more digital platforms, websites move their underlying architecture and the way data is accessed to APIs, it's just like a perfect storm, right? APIs are meant to be used by automation, meant to be used by bots in some ways.
Right. So interestingly, you mentioned a point. There's the side of threat actors using it. There's also a lot of data that's just becoming so much more important in the society that we live in, right? The demand for data has gone up, whether it's for marketing, it's for business development, personal targeting, all of these kinds of things in ad campaigns has become more and more prevalent over the last decade or so. And that's growing even further, the market for more data. So when you have that coupled with the fact that there is also a desire by companies to say, look, this data could get misused, so let's actually lock it down, which is where the APIs often come in. That dynamic is creating, in a sense, the perfect storm. So coming back to you, you were mentioning the kinds of things that happen here, but what is it that Sequence specifically focuses on?
Yeah, absolutely. So when Sequence says API security, right, that's a very broad term. In particular, there are three things that kind of matter in what we focus on. There's discovery, detection, and defense, right? So just what discovery means is
Mm-hmm.
trying to, from the outside in, understand what is my API attack surface, what APIs exist publicly that I can hit from the internet, right? That transact at all with, period, basically. Detection is focused a lot around inventory and compliance, meaning I need to identify the types of sensitive data that matter to me, right? What kinds of data do I know that I either collect and store, or my applications transact in? So payment details, right? Even if you're not storing the details, your APIs and applications are probably transacting with those if you're an e-com business, right? So you need to understand what your sensitive data assets are, where those are traveling, and where they exist in your API ecosystem in order to protect those. The defense piece is where we get to the automated abuse of the APIs. How do you detect behaviors that indicate someone is abusing the API? And that, to talk at it in kind of layman's terms, I would say one of the critical sort of API vulnerabilities that gets talked about is broken object level authorization, which is a nerdy term for kind of saying you're iterating and enumerating through a lot of different things, like a customer ID that your email isn't authorized to access. You're getting other people's data with your identifier, right? And that iterative behavior is something that on the defense side, you need to understand how to mitigate. So Sequence focuses on those three fields. The suite of products, kind of, it's like different halves of your brain that do different things. If your brain was split into three halves, but that's sort of the long and short of how Sequence is approaching this problem. Because, like you mentioned again, like APIs are the foundation upon which this is happening. So we really view API security, bot mitigation as like necessary, like twins in a sense, right? You can't have one without the other.
So what is it that you actually offer the client then? Those are the technologies behind it. That's the thing that powers what you're doing. So what is it that the customers are getting?
Yeah, so the customers receive license to the technologies. These are software components that are, either deployed in their network or they use us as a SaaS offering. And so customers and their security teams will use our products to implement their API security programs across those three stages, right? API discovery, API inventory, and API protection. Also, some customers will leverage our team of experts, managed services, to help them use the product, investigate, and let's say drive key performance and indicators that make sure your API attack surface is actually reducing your sensitive data. Like, hey, we found an API that's sending back way too much data that you don't want with your customers, and it's vulnerable to this, and it's being attacked, and we're blocking it, right? Like the human side, this is where that services piece goes towards your frameworks. Talk a lot about institutional knowledge, institutional practices. Humans are the ones driving security programs. You got to get the right people involved, the right teams, divisions. Like enterprise security is hard, basically.
Yeah. So I know we said this is a new problem that's evolved, but it's becoming a bigger and bigger problem. But there's so many different challenges when you think about safety. And I know, and in generally, people tend to separate them up. So there's safety, there's security, there's privacy. Oftentimes, we actually say that unauthorized scraping is not any of those. It's actually its own category of itself. It's not a privacy incident. It's not a security incident. It's not a safety concern. It's a separate category. But given that there are so many things to tackle in each one of those categories, why is it worth tackling the unauthorized scraping category?
Why is it? That's a great question. So I'll go into first story time here, and I'll talk about scraping of, some people may have heard the term SIM swapping and that abuse. What that is where an attacker is, many times folks have their phone number as a second factor of authentication on their sensitive accounts, like their bank accounts. Let's say an attacker was able to get your username and password and enter them in. They would still have to bypass that. They'd still have to get the code from your phone, right? So they have to do what's called a SIM swap to basically intercept that code, right? Well, before that even happens, there is some legwork and some foundational work that must be done to identify, to, let's say, go to a telecom provider, network, and understand which phone number, which telecom does this phone number belong to? Mm-hmm. Who owns this, right? Does this number exist? Is it using this provider, et cetera? And executing those campaigns, we'll call it like seeding the field for SIM swapping, mm-hmm. is kind of like an unauthorized scraping campaign. What that is someone pounding an API that's designed to look up if a phone number is eligible to be moved over to a different service. If I want to switch from Verizon to T-Mobile, they offer you a page that says, check if my phone number can be ported, right? And you as a user, when you use that, that's great. I mean, in the website, from the business perspective, that's a marketing tool. It's a lead gen tool. We're going to get more customers. Awesome. If that API is abused by bots and this data is scraped, and that data is actually like a meta knowledge of, is this phone eligible for this activity? Now those customers are at risk of having other accounts, because your phone number and your email are such a critical part of your digital identity, at risk of having other accounts taken over, financial losses, et cetera. So that's one story I would say that helps to draw a connection between unauthorized scraping, something that may otherwise feel benign, and real world problems, I'd say. There's some others we have from the retail universe about bots enabling smash and grab looting at stores, because they're trying to figure out where the high value items are at so they can go drive around and spend their time wisely. So LP teams would care about that.
So what you're saying is there's an intersection of the online world with the physical world that's starting to happen. I just coming back to the practices document for a second. It is split for those who start. When you do take a look, you're going to find that it's split between institutional, prevention, detection and mitigation, and enforcement. 4 pretty big categories in and of themselves, and which is in a way where I was talking about the holistic approach. So why is it important to have a comprehensive scraping mitigation approach?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with that institutional thing, because I think that's so important in the whole, in the holistic piece. The left hand must know what the right hand is doing. One of the worst case scenarios is where movement in the development, engineering, business teams to develop new features, to push out slick user experience, to drive growth. When that happens without the buy-in, protection, and involvement of the security team, you can expose critical data over APIs that you did not mean to do that, like absolutely at all. And that's where institutionally you need folks to understand in the development cycle, what are the pieces of sensitive data? How do I identify if an API is transacting with sensitive data or data that could be scraped? You need a program, a system whereby like those developers are going through checks and balances to make sure that you are not exposing APIs publicly before they've gone through a process. You're not exposed. Go ahead.
Even outside of APIs. So there's a whole bunch of different technical prevention mechanisms that companies can take, many of which are called out in the document. But what are some of those? I mean, I hear people say rate limits and checkpoints that you can block known threats. I mean, there's people will throw out different ideas, but you want to actually talk about what it is and what it means.
Yeah. Awesome question. So those terms like rate limit, CAPTCHA, those are all tools in your tool belt, basically. Rate limiting can look like simply volumetric pattern spike thresholds that an IP address or maybe a device fingerprint can't exceed against an API. A CAPTCHA is, a speed bump that is meant to introduce a little bit of, a Turing test, frankly, on a user going through a transaction. And it's a speed bump. Some cars bottom out on speed bumps. So you can make sure that you, like using these tools, you can reduce the amount of noise, right? Cut off the low hanging fruit and abuse and interaction with systems that would really just dilute and distract your organization from focusing on what matters. Beyond that, beyond those basics of, rate limiting, CAPTCHAs, things like that. Sorry, let me include in that IP reputation based blocking, right? I mentioned at the beginning the gasoline powering the fire of these proxy systems. You can get a lot of value by blocking malicious infrastructure. It's not a silver bullet, but when you're combining a bunch of bronze bullets, I guess here, you're getting a little bit closer. Moving to sort of the final from a technical prevention mechanism idea, it's really the behavioral analytics on top of your transactions, right? What does a user journey look like to get to a login, let's say, or to get to a profile? I'll say the word API just because I'm saying that a lot, but it just could be a place that you can access profile details, right? How do users get there, right? And then looking at other journeys that may differ from that, right? That indicate someone's going right to that endpoint, not going in a normal way with a little bit of entropy. You and I are different, right? We might access the same piece of data in a moderately different way, but programmatic automated abuse is probably going to go right after our target, fire away at it, and keep going down that path of least resistance.
In many ways, I mean, even in the technical world, there's technical prevention, there's detection, there's mitigation. I know when people hear those words, it's easy to just say, oh, it must be the same thing. But in fact, there's different. You were talking about things that may be considered prevention. You stop it from happening. You create a rate limit that slows it down, or actually bottoms it, like you said, a car that bottoms out on a speed bump. There's also things that, I don't know, you've dealt with this much, is limit access to public access for sensitive products. There's certain things that may require account creation or a login before you can actually get further beyond on a product. Or even blocking or limiting access to known threat entities. You know what they are. And this is one of the things that in the industry, the more intelligence sharing there is in this area, the greater of an impact that can be done. Right. And what's your take on that?
Absolutely. The threat sharing is essential, both within institutions, right? You need your developers talking to your loss prevention and fraud, talking to your security engineers, but across industries, across institutions, you need, I know me and my colleagues have worked with folks there's institutions called like RH-ISAC, FS ISAC. Those are financial and retail information security sharing associations. I'm going to butcher the abbreviation, but
Google search it.
Yeah, those are the things where people collaborate on this, organized crime group is going after me. They're doing this, they're using this thing. Those are very important. And, and also critically to move it beyond just like the really nerdy technical, how to stop it. They are after this piece of data. This is their workflow. This is the kind of fraud they're trying to do. It's more of the, it's almost like putting the detective hat on what's their motivation. What are they after? Because then people will look at themselves, like colleagues and industry peers will look at their environment and say, damn, like what would that look like against me? Where do I store this data? How is this data accessed in my environment? Do I actually know? And it's okay if you don't know, right? You just got to start trying to know.
Right. Well, let's just mention a little bit. You mentioned CAPTCHAs, right? In a sense, they're what I would call mitigation strategies, right? There's also detection strategies that people implement, and other. So, do you want to mention some other detection prevention type of things that fall in those categories?
Yeah, absolutely. When you say detection and prevention, are you kind of talking about before a CAPTCHA would be necessary, right? Like how to avoid that even? Yeah, absolutely. So that's where in our security sort of program and strategy, we focus a lot on that inventory and compliance piece. And that is identifying the types of sensitive data that your, APIs, websites, whatever, transact in, and making sure that you scan for those types of sensitive data against in two places. There's in the testing pipeline before this data and these APIs are exposed to the public. but there's also against your live real traffic. There is no substitute for the real thing, the live traffic and the real data. Everybody has test environments.
Right.
I've yet to see a test environment that perfectly matches a production environment. If you have one, that's like amazing, and you've got a really advanced organization. But identifying those sensitive data types, figuring out those patterns, applying that pattern match across a tool that can quickly and easily prioritize for you. These 10 endpoints have social security numbers. These 20 have credit cards, and get that information to your developers, and they can say, you know what? It's not necessary to have that in this transaction. It simply, we are reflecting too much back, not necessary, code it out, risk gone, right? Then no need for CAPTCHA at that point.
So either you or I are gonna trademark this first, but unauthorized scraping by design. Just like we talk about scraping or safety by design, privacy by design, security by design. I think what you're starting to say is there's actually an opportunity here to create unauthorized scraping by design. I do think your point specifically on if you can match the production environment with the test environment. I mean, frankly, you have a unicorn company if you can solve that problem. Having seen how different sometimes human behavior may be versus the testing environment. But it's a necessary component to at least start the basics of a production environment, right? You have to do that and then see and make adjustments and make it an iterative process, using the word you used earlier. So in terms of, how about other things? I mean, I've heard people say, well, just do a lockout or maybe do a checkpoint. What is that about?
A lockout or a checkpoint. So when I hear the term lockout, to me, a lot of times that implies a sort of an automated remediation action, right? I detected that something abusive may have happened, interesting may have happened, and I'm going to make sure that whatever comes next gets prevented, right? So you mentioned put data that matters, that could be scraped, behind logins, behind authentication places. Right. What comes next is authorization checks, right? Now that I'm authenticated, I know, I am who I am. Am I authorized to access A, B, and C, or just A and B? Implementing those authorization checks is critical. And also, let's say that authentication was abused. I am not, someone tricked my systems into thinking I am who I am. Have a mechanism whereby that account can be protected and locked out automatically. And so you don't even get to that next stage.
It's actually a great point. So the document also, practices document, highlights there's practices you can do to actually get an internal knowledge system. Mostly what I would call organizational or technical processes or strategies that companies can do, especially when there's resource capacity, or maybe you're a smaller company. So what's the advice you would give to the smaller companies or the slowly growing companies that are just entering that world where they're about to hit, I'm on the radar of the scrapers?
Yeah, absolutely. So the document goes through things like, gaining executive level sponsorship and awareness. Like, you got to get these types of conversations have to happen at the top level, because otherwise one day it will happen, but it'll happen under the context of an incident, right? Because something, data that shouldn't have been out there, it's now in the news. So get ahead of that. Build the organizational wide awareness of, these are the types of data that we care about the most. This is the stuff that we transact in. Now, again, maybe some of that can't be shared really publicly across an organization, but the key stakeholders need to know, in the development team, the engineering team, and in the security team. I would say those from a top level are just like the core human problems of organization, program development at these institutions. And if you can get those two things, you can move a lot faster on the strategic, like the technical strategic side.
So we going back to a little comment, almost like a side comment, we were just talking about threat intelligence, right? But let's actually talk about industry collaboration. We know this is an industry-wide issue, right? But even if it is, should companies not just work in silos? You know your company best. you should just do it by yourself. Why do we need to have an industry-wide multi-stakeholder collaboration type
Yeah.
of discussion even on this going forward?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's like kind of when you think you know is the minute you don't know, right? There are things that you can learn from other colleagues and other companies that have experienced issues, political, institutional issues, data hygiene and governance issues, or attack trends and TTPs. You can learn something from everyone in one of those components. You can learn something. Let's say you are a CISO and you have a team of your security engineers and architects. I promise you there's something to learn from someone on the marketing team or the sales team, an institution that you have, like a group of people who you haven't been collaborating with. I promise you there's something to learn if you're a bank from these retail environments, who might be, you have different incentives, but there's something you can learn from the user experience, fast growth, build this new feature, build and ship. Mm-hmm. There's something to learn from everyone. And within industries, right, you're most alike, you're most similar. So the trends that are affecting one retailer, a consolidated, concerted scraping campaign against one, the odds that that's happening on another are quite high. I mean, in the somewhat of a isolated use case, but an industry-wide trend is the whole sneaker bot thing. A lot of us have heard about sneaker bots and the PlayStation 5 bots over the holidays. The services that scrape those sites to identify when a PS5 or a shoe, or a Dunk or a Yeezy, well, Yeezy's no longer, but when those are available, those services, it's the same service that scrapes 10 different customers. So in that case, why not work together, right? It's obvious you have a mutual enemy in this case.
Okay, so you have a mutual enemy. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's plausible to share threat intelligence information? And would that be helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I mean, those ISACs are designed for that purpose. Vendors like ourselves are actually like not purposefully and expressly not included in those. Sometimes we'll do events and sponsor and discussions with our peers and our customers there, but those are meant to be, private security practitioners, the folks, cut out people who you may not feel have the exact, share your exact incentives and interests. But there are many really robust threat intel programs at security vendors, at companies, with the companies that have massive footprints and similar customers. And there are threat intel companies in and of themselves.
Yeah. I think what I'm hearing you say, there's an actual need here for threat intelligence sharing. It's going to be valuable if people can realize that a threat actor in company A may be hitting a platform of company B, and it's the same person disguised maybe differently. And that intel sharing can be extremely valuable in either creating mitigation, prevention, or detection, or even enforcement mechanisms. So thinking about this, we were just talking about why is that necessary? How about just working outside the world of just industry? I mean, you have regulators, you have policymakers. Yeah. Is there an opportunity? You have the public, for that matter. Is there an opportunity here? And is there a need here?
Yeah, I mean, from a public perspective, education, more and more education about the issue and how people are trying to abuse this is one. That education hopefully will lead people to share less whenever possible, right? That's a way to protect yourself. Regulators and policymakers, I don't know if my opinion on this is the most, I am not a lawyer for sure, but I know that, remember I started this talking about some of those residential proxy, the gasoline that powers the fire. Right. The United States government has done some takedowns of some of these networks recently. Brian Krebs has written some articles about them. Right. There's a company that really focuses on just these, Spur Intelligence, that I'm aware of, that the takedowns and takedowns of those sites and services, arrest warrants for the people who run these companies. Most of them are outside the reach of the law in this case, but I'd like to see that continue, and hopefully, if the folks who run those get made an example of, and again, that might not be the appropriate lawyerly thing to say, but those services are they're intended to be used for malicious purposes, and they are. Yeah.
That's actually a great way to stop here. I know we're almost close to time, so I want to take some questions from the audience. And I'm looking at my chat of people asking questions. I will say we have a really nice one for you. And I think it's directed at you. And the question is, the need for data is only growing, especially for ML and AI training. So where is all this data coming from? That's part one of the question. And the second part, is scraping increasing to feed that kind of ML and AI engines? And what else could be done to avoid that? So I guess there's three questions in one here.
Yeah.
So let's start with, where is this data coming from?
That's a good question. And where I stand depends on where I sit. So I'm going to be slightly biased in this answer. This data from where I work now and where I've been for the last 5-7 years, this data is coming from our product is sitting in the network of our clients, where we're seeing their network traffic. So we are seeing their layer 3 through layer 7 transaction details. So there's rich data in that stream. Now I will talk a little bit about beyond that, because not everyone that's unique.
Well, let me just, for the audience sake, what you just talked about is actually, how do you feed data for ML and AI for the purpose of prevention, detection, mitigation? But there's also data that is being collected for all sorts of non-threat detection or prevention of anti-scraping, or unauthorized scraping.
Yeah.
Right? So this is the world of data of an ML or AI engine wants to learn for whatever other reason, and there's opportunities, it seems, to scrape.
Yeah. For maybe what I can think of in that is maybe data to train pattern recognition for finding data types that look like something sensitive that someone would be incentivized to abuse, right? That is a very sort of important use case about, again, getting ahead before we're in the detection and prevention mitigation phase, getting ahead to discovery, right? That area. Again, I'm kind of just going off the cuff right now, but the great data source, if you're, I'm not aware who asked the question, but if you are someone who's positioned to see network logs, firewall logs, application, any application logs, there's a lot of data in there that you could use to train a model for that purpose.
Okay, so that actually brings another question we got from the audience, is how do you tackle advancements, right? Threat actors advance with advancement of anti-scraping mechanisms. So how do you do that when there's such a different level of understanding on the sophistication in the industry itself? It's not just in the threat actor side, but also on the industry side. So how do you tackle that?
Yeah. That's the grind right there, right? You got to keep up. You got to try and keep up with what's going on. I guess this might be a frustrating answer for whoever asked the question, but it's like back to basics. You got to get the basics right. If you nail, when we talk about API security to our clients and customers, we say it's two things that matter: discover your attack surface, profile your sensitive data, and reduce it. If you can do those two things at a programmatic level, only after you do that do you even unlock the chance, the opportunity to go along and advance with the attackers. So
I'll add your answer, which is also go look at the practices document. There's all sorts of things in there about places that you can start. There's also some detailed technical things in the appendix. Most people don't go in the appendix. This appendix is actually worth reading. So that is another thing. So Will, I actually appreciate you being here. So any final thoughts before we close it out? I know we're about to hit time on this.
No, I think this is great. I really appreciate you guys bringing us on. And I really appreciate the depth of thought that went into these practices and standards. It's not just technical. It addresses important technical components. It addresses very important political components. And I think it appropriately focuses on, we got to get the basics right, the definitions right? Too much if people can't even agree on what something means, you're going to have trouble advancing and tackling and solving the problem. So I think this is great. And I think understanding where, from our perspective, understanding where enterprise digital applications are going, the API direction, just kind of leads you to like, yeah, we have to protect this. It's just kind of second nature, right? It's many of the same problems, just reskinned in the, it's some of the same issues, vulnerabilities, exploit types that existed 10, 15 years ago, just kind of reskinned with a different flavor. So, my final thoughts is that API security is not voodoo magic. There's not, you have to cut out a lot of the jargon and terminology and words, and like this use case, focusing on a use case like this is actually a tremendous way to make it make sense and drive improvement.
Well, thank you for your time. Everyone stay with me for just another minute. I do want to say this is one of the first in a series of webinars that MUSA is going to hold. I do thank the team, the event planning team, and I will call out Nicole, Maya, and Kristen, who worked tremendously hard on getting that practices document out there and getting this even compiled in the first place. There was a lot of work that went around it, plus a whole bunch of other people who worked on that. Just looking at what we talked about, you and I will today, we focused on technical enforcement mechanisms, right, for companies to combat unauthorized scraping. We highlighted challenges around it, defining and regulating unauthorized scraping. That's always a challenge. The importance of industry working together to combat it. We also looked at some of the different categories, right? The institutional, the prevention, detection, and mitigation and enforcement measures that companies can take that are all found in the practices document that was released and published by MUSA today. So thank you for MUSA for actually having this, Venable for letting us have it on the Venable platform and the events team from there. And let me do what you're supposed to do, that closeout. If you enjoyed the conversation, today's webinar will be made available online on the MUSA website shortly. You can view the industry's practices to mitigate unauthorized data scraping on MUSA's website. That's up and live. And if you're interested in connecting with MUSA, please visit our website, antiscrapingalliance.org, and subscribe to our newsletter. You'll find it online as well, and connect with us on LinkedIn. So thank you all for joining and spending your morning, afternoon, or midday with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.